বৰঠাকুৰ IAS একাডেমি প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা
Everyone, welcome to the Hindu analysis for 19th June 2021. Let us begin with the first article today. SC refuses to intervene in High Court ruling on student activist bail. So, few days back we know that the Delhi High Court came out with a judgment giving bail to 3 accused in Delhi riots case, and particularly how it came up with an 110-page judgment on UAPA Act itself. As I said yesterday, the government approached Supreme Court in this regard. While the Supreme Court accepted the petition submitted by the government of India in this case, they said that they are not going to intervene on the High Court ruling, particularly in regards to the bail given to them. What the Supreme Court is concerned with, a hearing which was limited to whether issuing bail or granting bail to the accused or not, turned into a discussion on the entire law itself. So the Supreme Court clearly said that no, we are not going to worry about whether they have given the bail or not. We are not worried about the bail aspect of it. What we are worried about is a simple bail petition hearing. How did that turn into an entire hearing and an 110-page judgment on the entire act itself or the entire law itself? So they said that we are going to make necessary safeguards in that regard, because the government observed that using this particular judgment given in the Delhi High Court bail case for these activists, government said that people are going to use the same judgment issued by or ordered by the Delhi High Court and appeal again when they are serving time under UAPA Act for terror activities that they have carried out or waged war against India. That is a valid problem. So what people are going to do who are accused and are currently serving time for terrorist activities, they are going to use the Delhi High Court judgment and try to reappeal their case again in either High Courts or in Supreme Courts. That is why the government is skeptical or worried about the Delhi High Court judgment. Now, the Supreme Court said that the impungent judgment which was issued by the Delhi High Court shall not be treated as a precedent and may not be relied upon any of the parties in any of the proceedings. So, Supreme Court is clearly saying that is one and done. एक बार हो गया, फिर से यूज करने के लिए हमारा परमिशन नहीं है. So that is one and done. That is a specific case. That is one and done. You cannot use the same judgment in other cases, or you cannot use that judgment as a basis for future arguments also. So that is one and done. So they have put in a safeguard there so that people don't misuse the Delhi High Court judgment. Now, in that particular judgment, as I said, the High Court accused the police and security agencies for blurring the line between terrorist act under the UAPA and students' right to protest against the law. That was in the Delhi High Court judgment. Now, the Solicitor General Tushar Mehta has clearly said that because of that judgment, the entire UAPA Act was turned on its head along with the Constitution. And again, the government objected to the Delhi High Court judgment given by the Delhi High Court, because again, as I said, right, people are going to use that decision or the judgment as a basis for reappealing their cases. As the government observed, the issue is important and it will have pan-India ramifications. As there are many questions involved here, we want to decide it is for the good of the entire country. Right, the judge also observed that this particular Delhi High Court judgment will have certain ramifications which may not bode well for the good of the country. So again, they have to observe what has been done in the Delhi High Court judgment, and they have to reconsider how this is going to impact the act itself. So in conclusion, the Supreme Court observed that they are not going to intervene with the bail order as such. What they are worried about is how did a bail hearing turned into a law hearing, meaning how come the Delhi High Court decided or the bench decided to discuss the entire law instead of the bail hearing itself, and how did an 110-page judgment come about the law, not the bail hearing. But Supreme Court realized the ramifications of it and clearly put in safeguards stating that this is one and done judgment, you cannot use it anywhere else and you cannot use it again. So moving on to the next article, Twitter grilled by MPs over violation of new IT rules. We know what is going on with Twitter. Twitter is unwilling. Twitter is not willing to adhere to the IT guidelines. They are saying the most stupidest of the things that I have heard in my life, that we are for the freedom of the people, we uphold laws, we uphold that, we uphold this. See, they are a private company. They are a non-profit company. They are not the ones who are giving our rights. The Constitution of India gives us our right. If we have any problem with it, we approach the court. If the executive is not performing well, we have elections and we show our own likes and dislikes through elections. We have a democratic process in our country. The rights of the citizens are driven from the Constitution of India, protected by the Supreme Court or the judiciary of India, ensure that everybody has access to the rights is guaranteed by the executive. So a private company has no place in meddling with our own rights, and a private company, and that too a for-profit organization, coming out and saying that we'll uphold the right to freedom, we'll uphold the right to free speech. All this doesn't work out. They are operating in India. They have to adhere to the laws of the land. That is the baseline. Get it in. I am in support of Twitter. You are in support of Twitter. Yes, everything is fine. But at the end of the day, they have to adhere to the laws of the land. Whether you agree politically or not, it doesn't matter. Laws of the land reign supreme over anything else. Now, we know that how Government of India has clearly indicated that we are giving you the last chance to adhere to the IT guidelines. If you are not going to do that, we are going to take away your liability clause that is given to protect you. Meaning we are going to take away your intermediary tag so that people and governments can sue you and governments can file cases against you. Twitter again doing its own thing, saying that we are not going to bother about what Government of India says. हम जो करना है करेंगे. So the fallback is the Twitter Standing Committee on Information and Technology, which is headed by Shashi Tharoor, had called for the MD of Twitter to meet the House panel. So during this meeting, the House committee unanimously criticized Twitter for dragging its feet on failing to comply with the new IT rules and stated that you have to abide by the rules. They got a little bit angry because when the government itself, when the MPs, when the House Committee on Technology and Information itself is saying that you have to adhere to the guidelines, instead of saying yes or no, what Twitter was saying was, we have our own policy and we will abide by it. So the implication is, you have your laws, we have our laws, we are not going to follow yours, we are going to follow ours. So who is supreme over here? The elected government or the parliament that framed the guidelines? Are the government that framed the guidelines or a private company is supreme over here? That's a very dangerous line to accept in any country. Look at how European Union deals with these kinds of things. Even a small country like Nigeria decided to ban Twitter. See, banning is always a bad thing. You cannot ban anything. Until and unless there are certain national security implications, like how Government of India decided that they are going to ban 80 to 90 apps from the Chinese side, until and unless there is a valid national security importance, you cannot ban everything. But punishing, yes, that can be done, because in a democratic country, if somebody doesn't abide by the rules, they should be punished and they can be punished. In this case, Twitter is not adhering to the rules. Even every other company, though they dragged their feet, are now adhering to the IT guidelines. Why Twitter is so special? It shouldn't be that, and that power shouldn't exist in the hands of a private company that is faceless. Remember, nobody in India that works for Twitter have any role or say in the functioning of Twitter. Every decision comes out of Silicon Valley of United States, not from Indian shores. Their servers are even in US. Their Indian Twitter servers are not even in India. So that is the control that these people are trying to exert on us, and we should not allow these to happen, right? A company must abide by the rules of the government of India. Now the house committee members were critical of Twitter for dragging its feet. And as far as the fact checking thing, that's a whole discussion, and that goes into a lot of things and a lot of biases that the Twitter itself has. Twitter is known to doing this in any country that it operates. So we are not going to the questioning of fact checking policy of Twitter, because that is not the issue here. Now, as far as the new thing, recently there was a video shared by certain people, high profile influencers on social media platform, particularly Twitter, where a video was shared with misleading information or lack thereof. So as a result of it, an FIR has been filed in Ghaziabad against Twitter and all those involved for provoking communal sentiments, in particular this incident. So Twitter is going to have certain questions that they have to answer. Twitter is going to adhere to the rules of the land, and if not, Twitter must be tried. Banning is not a solution, remember that. You cannot ban everything. You have to get compliance one way or the other. Compliance is the best way to show that you have your own sovereignty. So moving on to the next article, what needs to be done with vaccines? So this editorial particularly gives a gloss over of what the current issue is and what should be the solution. So particularly one of the biggest vaccines that we have right now is Covishield, that is AstraZeneca's vaccine. The data that we have from England and other medical, particularly England, because England has the highest AstraZeneca vaccination rate, and that has the most credible health system in the world compared to other, but nonetheless we are going by the data of Public Health England. Now when they studied the AstraZeneca vaccine's efficacy, they found that 71% of the people were 70% efficacy was noticed when people received one dose, and it increased substantially to 92% after 2 doses were received. When people are vaccinated with both the doses, they saw a less number of people getting hospitalized, or hospitalization was low, and particularly the cause of the variant of concern is particularly the Delta variant, and the same was applicable to that also, meaning close to 92% of people were protected from hospitalization when vaccinated with AstraZeneca against the Delta variant. Both India and when the data from Public Health England and Indian studies is compared and contrasted and studied, it found out, we concluded that Covishield vaccine is most effective against almost all the variants that are in currency right now. Now, what is the problem with the current variants? Particularly the variant that we are struggling with is the Delta variant, and the Delta variant, the Delta plus variant AY1 is the transmissibility of it, because it is highly transmissible. Now at this point of time, it is again and again and again we have to repeat it, but nonetheless that's the fact and truth, that to both prevent the disease and slow the spread of the disease itself, vaccination is the only way. So when you're talking about a high density area like India and high population area like India, country like India, vaccination is the only solution at this point of time, because long back it has been established that lockdowns will only help in slowdown but not prevent the disease, and the economic cost that is imposed by lockdown is far more deadlier than the virus itself. Now one of the quick words or the catchy words that everybody spoke about during the first wave, and particularly nobody said about in the second wave, is the word of herd immunity. So herd immunity is the concept where you are accepting that people are going to get infected no matter what. That is only applicable in small population areas. Countries like India cannot afford herd immunity by the way that these experts are talking. These experts are saying that let people get infected. At one point or the other, the percentage of population that has contracted the virus already and vaccinated and had received vaccinations will reach certain point in time where this virus will subside. So when you are saying that, you are willing to accept large number of deaths also, because you just cannot let the virus spread on its own. There has to be certain control on it, and that the control can be done only by two things. One is you vaccinate them. Number two is you follow all safety protocols. Now, the higher level of the population that needs to be infected and vaccinated, or vaccinated in both the cases, let us go by both the cases, to receive herd immunity levels in India is going to have a large human cost and economical cost. So vaccination is one thing where you don't have the human cost or the economical cost, right? When you look at the quid pro quo of the whole economics of it, vaccination is the cheaper way out, because you cannot put a price on a human life. So human cost is, you cannot value or put a value on human cost. When you look at that basket of comparison, vaccination is the best option that you have to achieve herd immunity. So when in the earlier phases, when vaccines were first being rolled out, we thought that we are going to vaccinate at least 80% of the population by year end. In order to receive the herd immunity level in India, 85% of the population should be vaccinated, or they should have been infected. So infection is out of question. So we need to vaccinate 85% of the population to reach the herd immunity levels. That is the necessary number to protect our population from future waves. Now, the control of infection in population should be the long-term goal, and the short-term goal is to protect the individuals who are more vulnerable to the virus itself to save loss of life. Now the reality has already set in, but not accepted yet for whatever reasons, is that to achieve the goal of vaccinating every adult by the end of the year of 2021 is going to be impossible. Irrespective of how many vaccines you have, until and unless the production number goes up, it is very unlikely that every adult or every individual is going to get vaccinated by 2021. We are not even talking about children in this case, just adults. Now, therefore, we need to rethink our entire strategy and ensure that people who are more vulnerable to the virus itself must be vaccinated first to protect them. Now, the prioritization when you talk about vaccinating and framing a policy as to how to implement it should be based on where your focus should be, meaning which are the areas that are in risk. One is the one is the population which are critically endangered, meaning in the sense that who are in the highest risk group, who might contract and will result in their death. The second thing is the rural area. So that should be your focus. One is your rural area should be focused in vaccinating or formulating a policy. In addition to that, your policy should also think about high risk people or people who are vulnerable to the virus itself. And at this point of time, one of the critical things in the way of vaccination is the CoWIN platform. Whether you agree it or not, for urban people it is fine. In urban also there is a clear case of digital divide. So right now the bottleneck is the COVID app for vaccination that has to be taken care. It shouldn't be a limiting factor on access to the vaccines. It should add to the access of the vaccines, but not limiting on the access to the vaccine. Right now, COVID is one of the things that is limiting factor on access to vaccines. When as more and more vaccines are going to be made available for public distribution, the policy must change drastically. One of the things that is being explored extensively around the world is mix and match of the vaccines. That has to be adopted in India because you cannot ensure large coverage until and unless there is a flexibility in your vaccination program. The second thing that India has to approach or approve is therapeutics. Till this point of time, there is no large scale discussion on use of therapeutics to treat COVID. You know who has access to therapeutics now? I don't want to use the word, but sadly, only people who have connections and can afford that kind of a treatment have a high percentage of access to Regeneron and other therapeutics that are known to help COVID patients and reduce lung damage or any other organ damage because of COVID-19. So you need to make other therapeutics such as Regeneron and other therapeutics that are available worldwide to Indian population irrespective of their economical divide and social stature. That is a worrying case from my perspective. You might have heard a different idea or an argument, that is fine. From what I am seeing and what I am hearing and what I am reading, the access to other therapeutics other than plasma or whatever things that are being used in a massive way right now, there is a clear divide on economic basis also. That has to be cut down and cut down immediately, right? So, and you have to also think that vaccination coverage is the other critical aspect of it. First, you vaccinate your urban areas so that your rural areas are protected. Simultaneously, you increase the vaccination in rural areas so that you reach an equilibrium point. Professions are also needed to be vaccinated in the quick way. Now, I think I went about availability of data or lack thereof in Indian context at large in earlier classes. But remember, India doesn't have data. India doesn't collect data. If and when it collects, it does it in a bad way that you cannot use that data. So India needs a proper data management system and policy in place just to have a uniform methodology or paradigm in collection of data from almost all aspects of Indian society. So the data problem is not only limited to COVID-19 pandemic. Look at any problem in India you look at. The first thing, if you are conducting a scientific study into that problem, is the first thing that is thrown into your face, into a researcher's face, is the lack of data. Look at the Australian example. They have this platform, data platform, and this platform is funded by the government of Australia. I don't remember the name of it, but do a Google search for it. See, they have this data platform which is funded by the government. The entire job of this organization or the platform is to do one thing: collect any data that they get across in Australia. They don't discriminate on data. This is important, this is unimportant. It doesn't matter. Their sole job and the only job that they are funded is they have to collect data on every aspect of life of an Australian citizen and Australian governance. You know what they do? They collect, since it is funded by the government of Australia, if the government of Australia needs any data sets for research or for studying purposes, they give it for free. Because you are funding us, we will give you free. The other thing that they do in order to increase their data sets and do more research into and access more data and build resources, they sell that data to private companies. So if you are a private company, you want certain data. So let us say you are a private person, You are starting a business and you need a data set. You are starting a hotel. So you want to start a hotel in a particular Sydney. Let us say Sydney, you want to start a hotel. But you want to know how many people are earning so that so example, this is just an example. You want to know how many people are above 18 years and below 35 years, particularly living in that Sydney area. So you go to that organization, you say, I need this data for this Sydney city. You pay them the money, they'll give you the perfect data that they have been collecting since long. You say, I need last 5 years, last 1 year, last 6 months, they'll give you. That is how they earn money in addition to the funding given by the government, so that they can reinvest in collecting more data. Look how advantageous that is. It is not bogged down by bureaucracy. It is not bogged down by funding because it earns its own money. In the initial phases, yes, the government has to fund it. Yes, do they use government resources? Yes, they do use government resources. But at the end of the day, who are benefiting from that data? The government is getting benefits. India needs that kind of a system. When our statistics or NSSO comes out with statistics, for the God in me, I don't understand half of the time where they are getting the data from. See, I'm not complaining about their organization. Please remind that. I'm not complaining. Ask them, do you have certain problems when you are collecting data? Their answer will be 100 times or 100 times. Yes, we are having some trouble in getting data. So data is a critical part in framing policy, and particularly in the future, data is going to play a big role. So we need credible data, but there is a clear case of absence of credible data from the government itself in this case. So what is the direct result of lack of data? Speculation, pure speculation. When you are framing a policy, you don't know whom you are framing it for. When you are framing a scheme, you don't know whom you are framing it for. You think you are framing it for somebody, but in reality, it is not going to get used by those people because you don't have data whether will that scheme work for those people or not. You don't have data, man. It's like you are closing your eyes, you have your bow and arrow in your hands, you think you are going to hit the target, but let me tell you, you are going to hit somebody in the crowd. So that is what happens. Data, I know I'm going a little bit long on data, but understand the importance of data. When somebody who is working in a private sector or particularly in a private sector and has interactions with those kinds of people a lot of time, their entire policy is framed on data, man. They decide if they want to hire more people or fire more people is based on the data. The government cannot fire people, so let us at least use data for the better of the people. Now, the idea, particularly these authors are talking about returning to normalcy and availability of good data. Our ability to measure what matters is key, not only in this situation, in everyday life and everyday governance. This pandemic is not one and done. By the time you and I grow old, we are going to see few more pandemics and few more and much more deadlier than what we are seeing now. Moving on to the next article, US to spend $3.2 billion to develop treatments for COVID-19. So in all things irony, the United States has announced that they are going to spend $3.2 billion on developing antiviral treatments for COVID-19 and prepare for other pandemic threats. That's the news. But let us understand what is the implications of it, or what are the implications of it. Funding in the direction of surveillance and development of treatments is good. Funding for research on viruses, like the gain of research function that for sure resulted in COVID-19 pandemic, is bad. You don't need research on whether the virus will transmit to humans or not. What you need to know is if and when the virus transmitted from humans to animals to humans, or from any organism to humans, you need to know when it happened, where it happened, how it happened. Then only you can stop it from spreading. Then only you can develop treatments. So the research that resulted in COVID-19 pandemic is not the future of spending, particularly in healthcare or pandemic investment. What you need to do is you need to develop therapeutics, You need to develop access to treatments. The US spending $3.2 billion on treating COVID patients is little bit ironic at a point where poor countries don't have access to vaccines. First, lift your restrictions on mRNA technology, patents, increase vaccination. After this pandemic is controlled, right, then you talk about investing in future pandemics. That is the issue here. The issue is not America willing to spend 3.2. You spend 10 billion also, it doesn't matter. Right? You have technology. You don't need new treatments. You have vaccines with you right now. You have mRNA technology in your companies. Lift the patents. Or at least force your companies to share the data with companies in other countries. At a price. No country is asking for it to be free. If the country is willing to buy the technology, sell the technology, or at least force your companies to share the technology. So that is the problem here. So the pandemic potential, this person, Dr. Fauci, so we are not going to get into the discussion of it. So let us understand, 3.2 billion is a good number, 3.2 billion is a right investment, but where it is being spent also has to be seen. Majority of it, I'm pretty sure is going to be spent on purchasing vaccines and distributing them, leaving very little for future surveillance of pandemics or virus outbreaks. It has to be an equitable thing. So, but nonetheless, US is willing to spend 3.2 billion to develop treatments for COVID-19. That's the news. Moving on to the next article. Panel formed for talks on theater commands. So we talked about multi-domain operations in warfare, how India is talking with US and learning how to implement multi-domain operations in our own military. The problem with multi-domain operations is you need to have a unified theater commands or single or 2 or 3 theater commands. We don't have that because our armored forces cannot get on a single platform. There are various reasons for it. But nonetheless, what has been the problem in creating these theater commands, even though CDS post is existing, is there are a lot of interoperability problems between our armored forces. In order to solve those issues, not a negative thing, a very positive thing, they have issues and they have to come to a single platform and agree with various operating procedures and come out with solutions to all the interoperability problems that our armored forces have among themselves. So in order to move or find a solution in that regard, the government has created a panel with all the services and the CDS to discuss what are the problems with the current armed forces right now, what are the issues that are bringing down or bogging down the creation of theater commands, and what are the solutions for it. Right now we are talking about 2 to 5 theater commands. We have multiple theater commands with multiple branches involved. We want to bring that number down so that we can create a very potent multi-domain operation structure or strategy. Moving on to the next article, India, 3 EU nations begin naval exercise. So India for the first time is conducting a naval exercise with European Union Naval Force, EU NAVFOR. So the exercise has begun in Gulf of Aden on Friday. 5 warships from 4 different navies are participating in these 2-day exercises. This is good news in terms of our forces getting familiarized with European countries' navies, forces and operating procedures to develop interoperable communication and technological skills, so that if and in case if there is a need for both of the countries or European and Indian Navy and Indian Navy to function in either South China Sea or in other areas around the world, we can function cohesively. The next article, conservative cleric tipped to win as Iran votes in its presidential poll. So the problem here is the current president of Iran is a middleman. So he is not a conservative. He is a mix of conservative and liberal. He is a centrist. So the ramifications for India particularly is nothing is going to change. If things are going to get little bad, they are going to get little bad. But apart from them, nothing is going to change. As far as the economic situation of Iran, it is still bad because of sanctions imposed by America in regards to the nuclear deal. Neither Iran is backing down nor the US. The problem with US right now is the internal politics are playing such a bad temperament on the Iran deal itself. At this point of time, it is becoming very hard for the government in power, the Democrats, to get a comprehensive deal going with Iran. But the important thing is Iran does have elections. So the person who is tipped to win the election itself is very conservative. Two things, the stalemate with Americans is going to continue until unless something is broken or some camel's back is broken. But as far as the relations with India, they are though tied up with that of the American deal with the Iranians. India has its own interests and investments in Iran, but nonetheless, the relationship with Iran has been always a complicated one. It is never good. It is bad, very bad, good, very bad, very, very bad, but good, okay. So that is how we are never okay with Iranians, because they have their own interests and they have their own fears. So it is never good, but it is not bad sometimes, very, very bad sometimes, bad sometimes. So it's a fluctuating. Right now we are in a bad phase because the oil field that we tried to develop with them was awarded to some other company. The port issue, the trans railway issue. There are multiple issues that are going in right now. But nonetheless, this election though will have an internal ramification. And externally, we are going to see impact of this election or the person if he wins the election. But overall, the situation is not going to change. Thank you. Stay safe. Namaste.
বৰঠাকুৰ IAS একাডেমি প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা। বৰঠাকুৰ IAS একাডেমি।